Today, we're going to talk about one of history's most spectacular collapses, the fall of the Mughal Empire. I mean, think about it. For 150 years, an empire that controlled a quarter of the world's entire economy, an empire with almost unimaginable power, just fell apart. So how on earth does that happen? Let's dive in.
It's the big question, right? Does a powerful empire just crash and burn in some huge, single event? Or is it more like a slow, painful decay? Well, for the Mughals, it was a messy combination of both, rot from the inside and massive shocks from the outside. And believe it or not, it all starts with the death of just one man.
Yep, this was the first domino, the one event that sent a crack right through the foundation of this colossal empire. So, whose death could possibly set all of this in motion?
The year is 1707. After a reign of almost 50 years, the incredibly formidable Emperor Aurangzeb dies. And with him, really, the last era of true Mughal strength comes to a close. This moment, this is where everything starts to change.
But honestly, the empire was already a giant standing on some pretty shaky legs. Aurangzeb left behind a state that was stretched to its absolute breaking point. We're talking decades of non-stop, draining wars that had completely emptied the treasury. The provinces were getting restless, and this is the big one. There was no clear, capable successor ready to take over. He left behind a massive power vacuum, and as we know, something always rushes in to fill a vacuum.
And what rushed in was pure chaos. The years right after Aurangzeb's death weren't some slow, gentle decline. No, it was a frantic, desperate fight for survival. The empire suddenly found itself under siege from every direction, and maybe worst of all, from within.
The decay inside the court was just stunning. The throne basically became a game of musical chairs. They went through 4 different emperors in just 12 years. See, with every succession crisis, the princes would make these wild promises to powerful nobles to get their support. The result? The real power wasn't in the hands of the emperor anymore. It was with guys like the Said brothers. They became known as the kingmakers, literally putting emperors on the throne and then knocking them off whenever they felt like it. It was a huge red flag showing just how weak the central authority had become.
And the pace of it all was just relentless. It was one crisis right after another. While the so-called kingmakers were playing their games in the capital, powerful governors out in the provinces just started declaring independence. The Marathas were on the rise, becoming the new dominant power in India. And then came the knockout blow from the outside.
In 1739, the Persian ruler Nadir Shah just swept into India, smashed the Mughal army, and completely sacked Delhi. The level of destruction was just unimaginable. He hauled away an unbelievable amount of wealth, including the famous peacock throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond. But, this wasn't just about the money. It was a fatal blow to the empire's prestige, a humiliation that really, it would never ever recover from.
So, after the absolute shock of Nadir Shah's invasion, the whole idea of what an emperor was, it just changed. They became emperors in name only, basically puppets, with their strings being pulled by much more powerful forces.
It was a situation that was as tragic as it was absurd. I mean, the man on the throne still had this magnificent title, Emperor of Hindustan, but what was the reality? He was often little more than a prisoner in his own palace, a pensioner, living on whatever scraps regional warlords, or eventually a foreign company, decided to give him.
The story of Emperor Shah Alam II is maybe the most tragic symbol of this entire fall from grace. In 1788, a warlord named Halam Qadir stormed the palace and, in a fit of rage, personally blinded the emperor with his own hands. Can you even imagine that level of humiliation? The descendant of giants like Akbar and Shah Jahan, blinded and broken in his own court. His fate was really a dark mirror of the fate of his entire empire.
And as the Mughal sun was setting, another one was rising on the horizon. A new power, one that had arrived as just a humble trading company, was now getting ready to pick up the pieces and build its own empire. The British East India Company.
Now, their takeover wasn't some big, sudden invasion. It was a methodical, step-by-step process. Winning key battles like Plassey and Buxar gave them military control. But the real masterstroke, the move that changed the entire game, was step 3, getting the Diwani. So what exactly was the Diwani? Well, to put it simply, it was the right to collect taxes. In 1765, the defeated Emperor Shah Alam II was forced to grant this right to the East India Company. And that, right there, was the real transfer of power.
because whoever controls the money controls the kingdom. The company could now use the empire's own wealth to pay for its armies and run its administration. They weren't just traders anymore, they were the de facto rulers of the richest part of India.
So the empire just kind of limped on for another century, really just a shadow of what it once was, mostly confined to the city walls of Delhi. But there was one final, dramatic event that was about to bring the whole story to a crashing halt.
In 1857, Indian soldiers, the sepoys, rebelled against the British. They marched to Delhi and they proclaimed the elderly, poetry-loving Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader. It was this last, desperate attempt to rally around the symbolic power of the Mughal throne. But the revolt was crushed. The British took Delhi, they captured Zafar, executed his sons, and exiled the very last emperor to Rangoon, in what's now Myanmar. In 1858, the dynasty was formally abolished, and just like that, it was over.
In exile, completely broken and alone, the last Mughal emperor, who was a very gifted poet, wrote this heartbreaking couplet. It's a final lament for absolutely everything he'd lost.
The beloved street, that was his India. That was his Delhi. He died thousands of miles from home, denied even a simple burial in the land that his ancestors had ruled for more than 300 years. I don't think you could write a more powerful, more tragic epitaph for the end of an empire.
So if we're going to sum it all up, the fall wasn't just caused by one single thing. It was basically everything happening at once. Weak leadership created a power vacuum, endless internal wars just drained all the resources, ambitious regional powers and foreign invaders started carving up the empire piece by piece, and all the while, a very cunning European company exploited every single weakness until it became the master. It was truly a perfect storm of failure.
And that kind of brings us to a final thought. The political entity, the Mughal Empire, is gone, but its legacy, in art, in architecture like the Taj Mahal, in food, in culture, it's all around us. It really makes you wonder, what actually defines the end of an empire, and what parts of it never really die at all?